Hey, what's going on? Who that nation? It is yours truly, TJ Jones, your host of the State of the Saints podcast. And we have a special guest with us here on the State of the Saints podcast. You probably know his voice from WWL Radio, especially reading the Sprite scoreboard after every Saints game. But, he's been on the show before. Friend to the State of the Saints podcast. I'm talking about my guy, Mark Menard. What's going on, Mark?
Oh, not much, man. How you been?
Man, I've been all right, man. I'm glad to have you back here on the State of the Saints podcast and talk about yet another disappointing season for the New Orleans Saints, man. But we got to talk about it because I got to get your take. But before we start talking about the Saints, last season and the playoffs, let's go ahead and talk about some breaking news that just taken place in the last few hours. The Saints hired former defensive coordinator of the Dallas Cowboys, as well as coordinator with the Seattle Seahawks, Chris Richard, to be their secondary coach. So, Mark, first things first, what do you think about the hire of Chris Richard, and what do you think he can bring to the Saints secondary?
I think it's a good hire. I know the Seattle Seahawks defense has been down a little bit over the last, few years, but he was there when they were still kind of a force. He came in, obviously, after Dan Quinn left to coach the Falcons. But anytime you get somebody from that tree, I think you're doing all right. I don't know a ton about the guy yet. I'm going to have to do my due diligence now that he's hired part of the staff. But I know a little bit, and I think – in the role that he's going to be playing, he's going to be a great voice in the ear of Dennis Allen. And, Dennis Allen's still going to be running the show. DA's still going to be running the show, and you're still going to have Ryan Nielsen there. I think this is another voice that can really lend itself towards, making this defense or keeping this defense on the level it's been playing at. They were a little hit or miss this season, but, they did lock into a groove kind of midway through the season, and you'd love to see them, pick up that way when the season starts next year. And I think this is going to be a good push towards doing that.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you this. Do you think that this was a hire based on the fact that you've seen like the writing on the wall? Okay. You've seen Dennis Allen get an interview with the Philadelphia Eagles. So in the back of your mind, you're probably thinking to yourself, I don't know how many opportunities that I'm going to have with Dennis Allen. So do you think that they possibly hired Chris Richard, that, him being a secondary coach in case they lose Dennis Allen due to a head coaching job in the future, that he can slide on in there? So do you think that may have been the thought pattern of the Saints as well?
It might be. I think Ryan Nielsen is also going to be a strong contender for DC if Dennis Allen leaves. But the more guys you can have like that in the building, the better it is, because competition always breeds success. And, if you've got Chris Richard and you got Ryan Nielsen, and they're both, dueling it out for who might be the successor to Dennis Allen, pushing each other is only going to make each one better. And I think you really couldn't go wrong with either of those guys if you were to elevate one of them. And so you've got another year here probably with Dennis Allen. All the coaching hires are pretty much done in terms of head coaches, and DA is not going to make a lateral move to another DC job. So it looks like we got him for another year, and I think that's a good thing. I think DA is very good with the Saints defense, and I think when he does, I think he is going to move on at some point. Yeah. I think he's going to get another opportunity. The one head coaching job he got was with the Raiders when the Raiders were super dysfunctional, and you can't hold that against him that he didn't do well there, because nobody did well there, and really we haven't yet seen John Gruden do well there. He had a better season this year than last, but we haven't even seen him bring that franchise to where they think they need to be. Right. So you can't hold it against DA that he didn't do well in Oakland, and I think he's going to get another shot. And when he does, you're going to have Ryan Nielsen, you're going to have Chris Richard both in the building, and I think one of those guys is going to be primed to make the move up. And right now, I would give the edge to Nielsen just because he's been here longer, and obviously Sean Payton really wanted to keep him since he gave him that hefty promotion and bonus to keep him from going to LSU. Yeah. So I think they probably think good things are in his future as well, but we'll see how Chris Richard does in the black and gold too, and I think he's another one with a bright future, whether it's here or not.
Yeah, definitely. I was kind of in shock, Mark, that Chris Richard was out of the league. I mean, you look at what he did with the Dallas Cowboys. I mean, Rob Marinelli was the defensive coordinator, but people were ranting and raving about Chris Richard and the job that he did. And I can just remember this unfortunate a couple of years ago, around week 13, on Thursday night, the Saints took on the Dallas Cowboys, and they put on a great defensive performance against the New Orleans Saints. And Alvin Kamara, Drew Brees, Michael Thomas, all of them were non-factor. And Chris Richard had a lot to do with that. And like I said, this guy is a young coach. I think this is a great opportunity for him. Number one, for him to get back into the league, people to get eyes on him, because, you know, sometimes in the league when everything is moving forward, people have a tendency of forgetting about coaches. So for him to actually be on the same sidelines, coaching the secondary, I think it can put eyes back on him again. And he's definitely going to be one of those coaches, or it's rather he's going to be elevated to a DC position, or he's going to be elevated out of New Orleans as a head coach. I have so much faith in that guy that he can do some great things with this Saints secondary.
Well, and I think that, you know, when guys spend a year at home out of the league, I think it gives them a different perspective.
Right.
You know, it lets them recharge their batteries, first of all, because, look, being a coach in the NFL, whether you're a head coach or an assistant coach, is a grind.
Right.
And, you know, when guys do it for years and years and years, you can see where, you know, you might want to take a year off now that you've banked a little income and you got a little savings to fall back on. I think it's good for some of these guys to take a year off and you know, take a look around the league, see what's out there, you know, watch the games on TV and just kind of get a different perspective on how you do your job, how other teams are doing things. And then when you come back in, then you're ready to roll. And I think, you know, a year off is not a bad thing for any coach in the NFL if they find themselves out of work for whatever reason. Right. Take that year and you know, kind of find your way again, and it can bring some different ideas to the table.
Yeah, no doubt about that. But let's go ahead and move on and talk a little bit about the Saints postseason. Mark, this is the fourth time in a row this has happened. Okay, expectations has been high. Super Bowl or bust type aspirations for the New Orleans Saints. Yet in a crashing crescendo, if you will. The New Orleans Saints had an opportunity to beat the Tampa Bay Buccaneers for a third time. They couldn't get it done. And, you know, a lot of, you know, post-game storylines. Drew Brees playing with some injuries we didn't know of as fans. Michael Thomas getting 2 ankle surgeries. What's going on, Mark? Why is it this team, year after year for the past 4 seasons, just can't seem to get over that hump, in your opinion?
Well, first of all, winning a Super Bowl is hard. You know, every year, 31 teams go home unhappy, and only one goes home happy. And this should be a testament to people that this Saints team has this deep of a roster and is this talented and still couldn't quite get there. And you know, I think the year of the no call with the Rams was the one, you know, that got away, because that's the year that they should have gone, and I think they probably would have won. At the very least, they would have put up more than 3 points on that Patriots defense, like the Rams did, and I think they would have made it more of a game. And I think that's the one they should have gotten. I think they should have probably gotten the one in 2011 when they had 5 turnovers against the 49ers, still almost pulled that game out, and then, you know, Roman Harper and Malcolm Jenkins went to sleep on Vernon Davis, and essentially ended up getting Malcolm Jenkins run out of town as a free agent.
Yeah.
And look, you've seen him back this year, and you see what he's still got in the tank. That's a good player that ended up, you know, they had to make a change there because of that one playoff game, really. Yeah. And so it just shows you how tough it is to win a Super Bowl in the NFL. Now, as far as the Saints playoff aspirations, I think that this is a team that, you know, people expected a lot of, and for good reason. But it's not necessarily a disappointment to me that they went out earlier than we would have all wanted. If you take a look at Sean Payton's playoff resume, he's made the playoffs 9 times.
Right. And
7 of those, he's won at least one playoff game.
Right.
That's a pretty solid resume for a coach, including this year, where they beat the Bears, and then, you know, they ran into a Tampa Bay Buccaneers team that, you know, for whatever reason, they beat them twice in the regular season, and the third time Tampa got them. Yeah. So, look, let's make no mistake about it. This is a talented Buccaneers team that for a long time was kind of a quarterback away. You know, I think that there's still a lot ahead for Jameis Winston, but you can't deny that he was kind of holding that team back last year in terms of the turnovers.
Right.
And turnovers are one of the most important stats in football. If you lose that turnover battle, it's a huge uphill climb to try and win a game. Right. And if you're greatly outmatching the team you're up against, then you probably got a shot. But if you're on an even footing, it's going to make things hard. And the Saints showed it. They turned the ball over 4 times against Tampa and couldn't overcome that to advance in the playoffs. So I think that, this is a Tampa Bay Buccaneers team that was ready to make a push, and adding Tom Brady obviously was, the big push over the mountain that they needed to get to the Super Bowl. I don't think they're going to win. I'm going to go on record and say I don't think Tampa's going to win, just because I think the Chiefs are just too much of a juggernaut right now with what they have on offense. And it just seems like even when you get up on them, they always have an answer. And that's going to be really hard for Tampa to overcome. But I'm not saying they don't have a shot. I'm just saying that I think that their run's going to end in the Super Bowl. But for them, that's a huge win to go from not having made the playoffs since 2007 to a Super Bowl appearance. Right. Which, by the way, second year in a row that we see something like that. The 49ers had made the playoffs since 2013 last year. Mm-hmm. They go all the way to the Super Bowl.
Right.
And so it's kind of the new the new expectation in the NFL is that you can turn it around that quickly, and Tampa Bay has. As far as the Saints, it's just, it's one of those things where the injuries piled up on them on key people. They were still relatively healthy for most of the roster, but man, when your stars are hurting, it's hard to overcome another team in the playoffs who has their stars available. And we see this every year. I remember years back, there was a year where Will Smith underperformed. Right. And everybody dogged him all year long. And come to find out at the end of the year, he played with a sports hernia all year and had to get it fixed in the offseason. And it didn't come out in the season because Sean Payton doesn't talk about injuries. And, it's just not how he rolls. And usually we don't find out things about these guys until well afterward. Last year with Alvin Kamara, it was obvious to me that he was hurt.
Yeah.
But, people dogging him all season. Why isn't Alvin Kamara performing? And it's like, why wouldn't he want to perform? It's basically a contract year. Why would he not be putting his best foot forward? Excuse me. And so, it comes out at the end of the year. Alvin Kamara was hurt. This year with Michael Thomas, all years he's been trying to get back on the field and people kind of dogging him because, he wasn't performing. And it's like, Mike's hurt, guys. Like, if you see a player consistently play well for their entire career, and then one year they have like a drop off and they're not like over 35, then you can guess there's probably an injury you don't know about.
Exactly.
And so you have to give these guys the benefit of the doubt. And I think that's where sometimes people get impatient as sports fans, is they don't look a little deeper below the surface and think, well, maybe this guy's dealing with something. Because we all want the instant gratification. We all want the championship. And when we expect it and it doesn't come, it can be a little hard to fathom why it didn't happen. But I think in the case of Michael Thomas, obviously he was dealing with injuries and he's going to need surgery here in the offseason. Hopefully he can come back and he's young enough where he can come back and maybe be himself again. And with Drew, we didn't know the extent of his injuries, but what we knew about was already pretty bad in terms of a collapsed lung and 11 broken ribs.
Right.
That's hard to breathe and sleep at night, much less play a game of football. So we knew he was dealing with some things, and to hear about the torn rotator cuff and hear about the other things he was dealing with after the fact, everything kind of makes sense in hindsight when you watch how he played. And I think that's why we saw the play from Jameis Winston in the playoff game where, the deep pass for the touchdown, Drew couldn't make that throw. It's obvious, knowing about the torn rotator cuff and the rib injuries and everything. That's not a throw he was going to be able to make in the playoffs. And Sean Payton did what needed to be done and put Jameis in the game to make that throw. And a lot of it makes sense now. So I think in terms of the Saints this season, they just had a couple of really injured stars who couldn't answer the bell for whatever reason and did all they could to try to help this team win. And in the end, what they were able to give us wasn't enough. And you also have to look at guys who underperformed, like Jared Cook, who I think his days in black and gold are finished. Yeah. I think they're probably going to move on from him this offseason. Mm-hmm. And for me, that's a guy that I've been really disappointed in because I was very excited when they signed him as a free agent. The year before he came to the Saints, I actually had him on my fantasy team as a Raider. And so I knew what his tight end numbers were. Yeah. He was my starter week in and week out. And when we got him, it's like he's a little bit over 30, but I think he's still got something in the tank. Excuse me. Obviously, he had a little bit of chemistry to build with Drew Brees, and that was hampered when Drew got the thumb injury last year. But we saw them mid-season start to really hook up. And then this season, when we thought that they'd pick up where they left off, it just didn't. And, we also saw him, become a little turnover prone. And that really, that fumble in the playoff game, I think is what turned the tide for the Saints.
Yeah.
I think once that fumble happened, the momentum was in their favor, and then it wasn't, and then they couldn't get it back.
Yeah. Are the Saints the most underachieving team in NFL history, Mark?
I guess it depends on what your criteria are. I look at 4 Buffalo Bills teams in a row that went to the Super Bowl and didn't win one. That's rough. I look at 4 Minnesota Vikings teams in the 70s that went to the Super Bowl and didn't win one. That's rough. If you take a look at the Saints didn't get to a Super Bowl, maybe under those criteria, yeah. But I would also take a look at the Vikings teams with Chris Carter and Randy Moss and Dante Culpepper. That team probably should have made a Super Bowl appearance and didn't. So I don't know if I would. It's hard to say of all time for anything, but I think for Saints fans. Certainly, this stretch of the Saints franchise is probably the most underwhelming in terms of you thought you had a real shot, and all it ended up with was one NFC Championship game appearance in those Super Bowls. So I think for Saints fans, yeah, you might say this is the most disappointing stretch, but for me, I still say that 2011 year when they set all those records on offense and didn't make it to the NFC title game. Where, they probably would have won the NFC title game if they had just gotten past the 49ers because they would have hosted, they would have drawn a wild card Giants team at home. Yeah. And to me was still the most disappointing season in terms of what the Saints put on the field. Right. I would say the most disappointing was 2018 with the no call because that one it just felt like it was stolen. Yeah. And that's really hard to deal with. That's the only year that I can remember where I actually didn't watch the Super Bowl.
Yeah. I didn't either. I never saw the Super Bowl.
I joined in with the calls of everybody here in New Orleans that said boycott. I was like, you know what? I'm in. I'm boycott. I'm taking my Sunday back. We're gonna go do stuff as a family and have some fun and not even worry about the fact that there's a football game on. And so
it didn't seem like we were the only ones that boycotted. I mean, Saints fans and the offense of both teams seemed to boycott that game. So. It wasn't very good from what I heard because I never saw it. That's one of the Super Bowls that I can remember in my lifetime that I just never watched. I think from probably the age of 6 to current, I can just remember laying my eyes on at least one of those Super Bowls. Up to the age of 34 where I am now. But I've never seen that Super Bowl. Never had an interest either. So.
I'm not going to watch it. It's dead to me. The Super Bowl didn't happen that year.
Yeah, but I mean, Mark, look, 49 wins, over the past 4 seasons. I mean, that's the NFL record, for a team that never reached the Super Bowl. I mean, it's unfortunate, but I mean, you made a very interesting point. I mean, you got to give some credit here. The disappointments the Saints have had over the last 4 seasons, and for them to bounce back, and go to the postseason each and every time when other teams probably would have folded like a cheap tent. I mean, you got to give them credit there. But finally, Mark, I want to ask you about the quarterback situation. This has become absolutely hilarious to me. People are talking about the Saints possibly trying to acquire Deshaun Watson, but if you realize what Houston is asking for, I mean, the most logical Saints fan would be like, nah. Okay, but the Saints seems like they're going to have to find a successor to Drew Brees. Drew Brees hasn't made an official press conference yet. I feel like it's coming pretty soon. I think he's just trying to give the NFL their moment before he announces it. But the Saints moving forward with their succession plan with that may involve Taysom Hill or even Jameis Winston. What do you think the Saints need to do? Going forward, should they keep Jameis Winston, who is right now a free agent? Should they try to go with Taysom Hill, or should they, try to get maybe a rookie quarterback that everybody has been talking about in the Who Dat Nation, like a Mac Jones?
Well, let's start with Taysom Hill. because he's the one we have the most information on. Right. Got to see him start 4 games this year because Drew Brees was hurt with the rib injury. We saw him play the Atlanta Falcons twice. Yeah. We saw him play a Denver Broncos team without a quarterback. Right. And we saw him lose to a Philadelphia Eagles team that was not very good. Mm-hmm. I think I've seen enough of Taysom Hill that I don't really trust him as a starter at this point. I think he's too turnover prone. I think, and what's the worst part about it is it's not even interceptions. He just fumbles too much.
Right.
And I think we've also seen when he's in the pocket, he doesn't throw with anticipation and he holds the ball too long.
Yeah.
And, at this point, with his age, I don't know how much of that's going to change. Right. It's not like he's a young, 23-year-old who you can mold. He kind of is who he is at this point.
Right.
And so I think in terms of Taysom Hill, I don't really trust him as the regular starter going forward. I trust him in the role he's had as a change of pace quarterback, which is kind of a new position Sean Payton has invented. You used to have change of pace running backs. Now you got change of pace quarterback in New Orleans.
Right.
I think Taysom Hill in short bursts is very effective. But I also think even that you're starting to telegraph, when he comes in the game, it's going to be a run. Mm-hmm. And if he's going to have to show me a lot in the passing game for me to be comfortable with him being a starting quarterback for a team that I think is still going to be at least a playoff contender.
Right.
In terms of Jameis Winston, all of that is right now up in the air because he's not under contract.
Good point.
So I wouldn't object to giving Jameis a shot at seeing what he could do. I think if we talked about Jameis last time I was on, and I think the difference between Jameis and Teddy Bridgewater is that Teddy had a year in the system before he was thrust into a starting role, and I think that really set him up for success. Right. I think with Jameis, not only had he just gotten here, he didn't have mini camps, he didn't have training camp, he didn't have OTAs. It was all virtual, and then it is what it is with the season that during a pandemic, and they did the best they could. But I just I think this year would have been too soon to really give him a fair shot. And so personally, I'm glad that we got to see Taysom start. They might be
fair assessment. I mean, you did see a combination of Jameis this year.
Yeah. So yeah, I think it was good that we got a fair assessment of Taysom Hill while Drew was out this season, because I think as long as he's been in the system, he was ready for that. I think it would have been unfair to Jameis to throw him in and then hold it against him if something went wrong.
Right.
So I think, and late in the season, we saw him go in and run that play for the deep bomb in the playoffs. And I think, had something happened to Drew in that playoff game, I would have been more comfortable at that point with Jameis coming in because, he's had more time to digest the system. And I think, if they bring him back, he'll have a whole offseason with the playbook. He'll have hopefully actual OTAs and actual mini camps and actual training camp. And, we'll get to see what he can really do. We haven't seen him since Tampa let him go in any meaningful football. We know he had LASIK surgery, so hopefully his eyes are better. We know he's going to be in a different system from the Bruce Arians system, which, maximizes passes and kind of downplays turnovers and bad throws until it comes time to evaluate your quarterback and maybe give him a new contract. Right. Then it's like, it's a lot of turnovers there, Jameis. But we saw that, and we talked about this last time. We saw that out of Tom Brady early in the year. A lot of turnovers because that's how Arians' system works. And so in that respect, Jameis kind of wasn't given a fair shake in terms of the end of his career in Tampa. Now, could he be better in New Orleans? It's possible. We just don't know because we haven't seen him really run Sean Payton's system. I'd be willing to give him a shot. When it comes to Deshaun Watson, who wouldn't want Deshaun Watson? Yeah. If all things were equal and you said you could have Deshaun Watson or Jameis Winston, obviously Deshaun Watson would be the answer. But You're right. What they're going to ask for him would mortgage any team's future.
Yep.
And he's going to have to go to a team that's ready to contend for a Super Bowl right now. And in terms of whether that's the Saints or not, the offseason will tell us because they have to get under the salary cap. And I don't think this is a deal where they're going to have to blow up the team and this is going to be, nothing but rookies and afterthoughts next season other than like Alvin Kamara. It's not going to be like that. I've seen people say, with a very negative tone that, the Saints window is closed. I don't think it's going to be quite that bad. I think we're going to see some role players and some veterans that have been here a while. Maybe have to take a walk and find employment elsewhere just because we can't afford them as we try to get under the cap. But I think in terms of your key players, in terms of your starters, those guys are going to still be here, and it's going to be up to the Saints to rebuild that depth through undrafted free agents, through draft picks, through guys that they grab off of other teams' practice squads, or guys who show up in the offseason. They're going to have to find those guys, and I think that they can find those guys. They've shown over and over again that they can find the diamond in the rough when it comes to guys who weren't drafted and just need a shot. Look at a guy like Carl Granderson. Yeah. Look at a guy like even going back to Pierre Thomas. Yeah, Pierre Thomas came in as an undrafted rookie, and they had drafted a running back that year, and Antonio Pittman, who had been a college star. And when all was said and done, they cut Pittman and kept Pierre Thomas. Yep. Look at Marcus Colston, a 7th-round pick, who by the end of training camp, they were trading Dante Stallworth because Colston had come along so far, and they had found one. Yep. So I think that this is a regime that can find those guys, and that's what they're going to have to do. They're going to have to rebuild some of the depth on this roster. But in terms of guys like Alvin Kamara, Michael Thomas, Cam Jordan, Marshawn Lattimore, Ryan Ramczyk, I think they're going to hold on to all those guys, and it's not going to be the fire sale that some people think it's going to be. Because, look, the front office for the Saints always finds a way. Yep. Mickey Loomis finds a way. Kai Harley finds a way. And more often than not, they not only keep the guys they want, but manage to find some kind of room to go sign a couple guys they need. Yep. So I don't think it's doom and gloom for the Saints. I think obviously the biggest question they have to square away is at quarterback, and that's why we're talking about it. And if it's Jameis Winston, if that's the guy that Sean brings back and settles on, I'm going to trust Sean because he hasn't led us astray in terms of with a couple of down years in there when they were 7-9 a couple of times. And what did he do? He shook things up. He reevaluated his scouting department. He reevaluated his support staff and got it fixed. So I tend to trust Mickey and Sean in these decisions until they prove me otherwise. Yeah. And so if they bring back Jameis, then and he's the guy, I'm going to say, let's go. Let's see what he's got. Because I do think his second act is going to be different from his first.
That's a fair assessment, Mark. I think a lot of people are rooting for Jameis Winston this time around. You hit the nail on the head when it comes to Bruce Arians. I mean, you look at the track record. Every quarterback that he was coaching always had a high rate of interceptions, and you can even make an argument and say that Tom Brady switched that offense around. He's running more of the New England type offense out there in Tampa. So I want to give Bruce Arians credit on there, a guy who has a huge ego. For him to humble himself and say, you know what, this isn't working. Let's try to go with what makes Tom more comfortable. And now they got a Super Bowl berth in the process. But, Mark, thank you so much for being a part of the State of the Saints podcast. And before you go, my friend, let everybody know how they can get in touch with you.
I'm on Twitter at Mark Menard 13. That's MarkMenard 13. I'm also, I work for WWL Radio. You can hear me on doing anchoring the sportscast every afternoon, starting at 4:00. I'm part of the crew with Bobby Hebert and Christian Garrick. I get to contribute on that show a bit. Right now, I'm kind of in full Pelicans mode, so you'll be hearing me talk Pelicans a lot. And late last season, I got elevated to hosting the locker room show after Saints games. So when Saints season cranks back up, hopefully I did enough, and they'll keep me around, and because that's a fun gig, and you guys can tune in and hear that on the Saints Radio Network when the season comes back around.
Yeah, no doubt about it, Mark. And definitely want to get you back on the new podcast I have called the State of the Game podcast to talk Pelicans. But thank you so much, my friend, and you take care.
Thanks for having me back. It's always a good time talking to you, man. Appreciate it.
All right, thank you.